again. This is actually going to be our last pre launch session together for the book. As you can see there, Masculine Revolution, a journey to reclaim your masculine essence through the power of archetypes. So, there's a lot actually to talk about here, and I'm seeing people joining in. We had a few people yesterday from this side of in the US, and then people that were joining from in Europe and the UK as well. Like always, I will get to your questions towards the end of this book. So, just a little quick recap. We are launching this book, The Masculine Revolution, tomorrow, October 21st. And there, for the first 10 people that have subscribed or they joined on the website, and which is www.discoveringmyself.com. Actually, let me just type it here. Maybe that would be easier. Once you get on there, onto the website, you can't miss it. It's a big pop up that just pops up. You just put your first name and your email. That'll add you to the list. You'll be notified right before we launch, as well as the first 10 people get a copy of the book for free. And if you would like to give us some feedback on the book, that would be wonderful. So let's get right into it. I've had a couple different questions from people today. I had an amazing conversation with a gentleman, I believe in New York. I want to say New York. And we had this conversation, and one of the things that revolved or that came out of the conversation pertaining to this book was this whole idea of people concretizing, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that, concretizing their identity. And when I use the word concretize, just kind of what it means, concrete, or making something that's hard, or hard and fast, or hard and true. I mean, there's different ways to kind of word that. But when you think of concrete, it's pretty hard. And so when we need a solid foundation, concrete could be used, and that would be pretty hard. But when we're talking about psychological concepts like identity or personality, if you will, then concrete is something that's not going to be helpful when it comes to that. And so, in my conversation today, it was interesting because we spoke about this whole idea that's happening nowadays with gender fluidity, sexual fluidity, um, the pronouns, using the different types of the pronouns so that it's not binary, it's not putting you in one boat or another. And we spoke about that. And one of the interesting things that came up of the conversation was this idea of fixation or fixed or concretizing. And I'm going to tie that up with a portion that I'm going to read from the book that has to do with the lover archetype. So, for those of you that have not been joining us this week, as we've been doing this week long pre launch, we're talking about masculine archetypes. And again, archetypes is an energy. I always like to say it's like an underlying energy that influences us as human beings. The more unconscious we are, meaning we're not aware of what we do, we're not aware of the relationships that we have and that we keep, the more unconscious we are about those things because we don't process our lives, then the more we're going to be under the sway of these underlying energies, which part of that is what we call in depth psychology the archetypes, or in Jungian psychology, analytical psychology, we call them the archetypes. Those are not the only underlying forces that we have to deal with, but just to keep the conversation focused and streamlined, the archetypes are very powerful, and they have this underlying flow and energy to them. And so this is something that is important to kind of be aware of. So I just kind of wanted to bring that and mention that. And so in this conversation that I had, again, very interesting conversation, which gave me a lot of food for thought and energy, is this idea how the more we are fixated on an idea of who we are, or an idea or principle, even of what constitutes our identity, and we're not flexible, which that's kind of the irony here. Because in one aspect, you could say, well, Dr. RB, the whole idea of being gender fluid is to not be so fixated, right? Is to allow yourself to just kind of be fluid about your sexuality or your identity. However, but even focusing on that as part of one's personality or identity is already fixating or already concretizing, you see. So again, it's something for us to be conscious of. And I really do hope that as you go through this book, and even as you hear me speak, I'm really hoping that this is not in any way meant to be judgmental. And if it does come across that way, I do apologize. It's really meant to be conscious awakening or conscious promoting, because the whole reason we're here, in my belief, and I strongly do believe that we're here to process life. We're here to live life and process it, because as we're here living, we have to ask these questions. What's the meaning behind this? Why did this happen? What can I learn from this experience? That's why we're here. And that's why it's so important to be awake and to be conscious about all of those things. So, again, as we take a look at what I refer to as masculinity, according to this book, it's really about awakening ourselves to other possibilities of what masculinity could entail. And a lot of the times when I speak about masculinity, I'll get pushback from people that find it threatening, or they're already kind of thinking that my idea of masculinity is patriarchy, or my idea of masculinity is something that harms people, or nowadays with everything that we're experiencing in the news, the patriarchy is in full display. The shadow side of the king masculine archetype, which I spoke about this week, which is the shadow tyrant energy, is in display. And so it's very interesting about how we look at masculinity. I mean, there's so much I can tell you because this is such a topic that I'm very passionate about. But time is limited, and we're going to get into it. So I'm going to read you a portion. I'm looking at different places because I have all these different streaming people joining. So hello to everyone. I just want to get into it. So forgive me if I don't say hello to you personally, but thank you for joining us. So I'm going to read to you. I'm going to read from the lover archetype pages. So here we go. In alchemy, one of the operations the alchemists use when working with metal was called coagulatio, which is the solidification of a metal or another type of substance. In this process, shape and form were given to either a solution, liquid form, or gaseous form. A material became hardened if the liquid was evaporated, or it was kept soft and malleable like mud. In the work of analysis, the coagulatio or coagulation stage can be seen when a thought or idea is put into observable action. When a shape is given something abstract as a feeling or thought, coagulatio is also used. A little detour. Carl Jung found alchemy's processes, and I just want to kind of pause here. Alchemy is a precursor to modern day chemistry. So it was used during the medieval times, Dark Ages, and it was a way that early chemists worked on different materials. However, there was a movement that also used the same process to speak about philosophical things, psychological things, even though psychology was not a science yet. So I guess you could say pre psychological things, and definitely philosophy. So it's a very interesting subject. Carl Jung really dove into alchemy and he used it as part of his process when working in with the analysis with patients and with analysis. So Carl Jung found alchemy's processes incredibly useful as metaphors in his analytic work. When discussing our emotions or thoughts, merely staying at a vague, abstract level is not helpful. Instead, he utilized alchemical symbols and concepts to delve deeper into the unconscious mind. Understanding the transformative processes and hidden meanings behind human experience. By embracing these metaphors, Jung believed individuals could gain profound insights and better comprehend their inner selves. Now, let me give you a story about a client I had so we can better understand this coagulation concept better. So, when you think of coagulation, think that you're holding mud. It could be that thick red mud we find in Mississippi. It could be mud that you make on the beach when the sand is wet in your hands. That is coagulation as a metaphor, but let's think of it like that. I had a client who would become paralyzed when she was under stress. In one session, I asked her to describe the stress. At first, she looked puzzled. And then, after a few seconds of silence, she began to speak about a dark tornado coming down from the sky. It began to tear up the land, making its way toward her. It was helpful to her to begin dealing with this imaginary tornado as we would if a real tornado came down from the sky and headed our way. We did some active imagination, which is a technique used in the analytic method. And slowly, through time, through sessions, her paralysis began to lose its grasp. It began to subside. She allowed herself finally to run and seek shelter. Using a metaphor or coagulation is much like the blood that moves through the arteries and veins and capillaries that erect the penis. The blood gives life to the penis, as it were, and metaphor brings to life what is formless in the emotion or symptom. In this way, the lover archetype carries the operation of coagulation and metaphor. So I probably shocked some of you. Yes, I'm seeing in the chats that I use the P word. But again, this is all part of the bigger lover archetype, the masculine archetype that I'm describing here in this part of the book. And I'm going to go a little bit further here because I think this would help a little bit more. One could say that in biology or physiology, a baby is also an example of coagulation. It starts with a desire between two people. They unite in sexual intercourse, and the desire for each other materializes in a fertilized egg, which becomes an embryo soon after, then a fetus. The desire or thought, which is it's abstract, desire, thought, I mean, you can't see it, you can't hold on to it. So the desire or thought took shape and became a life of its own. The lover archetype embodies this unification, this energy and spirit, desire into matter, and then we have a physical life come into being. So again, it's this whole idea of allowing something that's formless and you give it shape and it becomes something tangible. This is all part of the lover archetype in the masculine. So, for example, I'm just thinking of the term or what people use in sayings, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I mean, we grew up hearing that, right? Sticks and stones is a coagulation of those words because we all know that words can hurt us, sometimes even worse than sticks and stones. So, this is a way that something that's abstract and formless becomes something that's almost physical and it does a lot of damage. And I think nowadays, if we could really sit with a lot of what's happening, especially this energy that's very thick, it's very powerful, if we could kind of just learn to observe this energy that's very heavy, then we're able to move and decide and make decisions and take action. But it's this idea of staying in the mud, kind of keeping your feet grounded in this thick mud, allowing yourself to feel before you walk again or run or do whatever you're going to do next. Which, if we don't stay with the energy and the emotion and all of that, we then have the risk of acting impulsively. So I wanted to kind of leave you with that little piece. And so I want to now open this up a little bit because the time always just flies by when you're having fun, right? So one of the questions that I have here is, so are you saying that masculinity includes the lover energy? And what does that have to do with the other things that you've spoken about, like the warrior and the king? That's a great question. So, again, this is all about showing the different faces of masculinity and masculine archetypes and that energy that flows underneath. So, the king energy or the king archetype is different than the lover. Can you have both of them together? Why not? I mean, who am I to say or to give limits on the archetypes? So it's really just a way to kind of separate, acknowledge the differences, and then you let go, and then they kind of mesh back together in a way. So you do have, for example, a king and a lover together. What comes to mind is Saint Louis from France. He was a medieval king that ruled over France, and he was known for being saintly or saint-like, because he showed tremendous amount of love for his people, and yet he was a ruling monarch. So St. Louis comes to mind, and I'm just speaking off the surface. It's not like I'm an expert on the life of St. Louis, but on the surface, that is the image that I can kind of see there. You have the combination of king and lover, you know. Um, Another, for example, a warrior and a lover together, what comes to mind would be Robin Hood. Robin Hood was a warrior, according to legend. He would take from the rich and give to the poor and all of that. There's a warrior, justice, fighting aspect to Robin Hood. But then when you see the movie, which of course, who knows if it's accurate, but I love the movie anyway. The movie really brings the lover energy into it. And of course, he falls in love with the noble woman. Um, I'm really bad with names, so I don't remember her name. Um, and but yes, so lady, whatever her name is, in the movie it shows this wonderful romance between them two. So again, the union of lover and king. The image of the Christ also comes to mind, where you have the King of the Jews with the love for his people that the Christ figure gave his life for the people. So that's another very strong lover king energy. Um, you could also say that the Christ figure was a warrior at times, going into the temple and clearing off the temple. You have King Solomon, who also was a king, but yet there's the Book of Solomon, which shows the tremendous love that he had through the wisdom. So there's the king, and then there's this love, and then the wise or the wisdom has also this magician archetypal energy to it. So there's really a lot of these archetypal energies that kind of flow through these individuals that we learn about and see in history or in religious um, religious history or religious mythology, if you want to look at it that way. It doesn't really matter because they're all kind of saying the same thing, that there is this underlying energy that's just oozing out and flowing out through this figure. And that's what I'm talking about. That's really what my book is about. And it's so important in my going back to my conversation today with this gentleman, which, I just found it amazing. And that is that I think we are missing. I mean, well, he said it. And then, of course, I wrote this book and I totally agree. We're missing this idea of ritual. Nowadays, with our advanced sense of science and empiricism, which has ruled for a long time now, you do have a lot of movements towards getting away from that, like quantum physics. Quantum physics is much more aligned with empiricism or empiricist approach. Excuse me, I'm getting tongue twisted here. And as we move away from the science that you can measure based on your five senses and based on the material, as we move more towards asking questions and exploring energy, that's what's important here. And we as human beings are going to be challenged to do that more and more and more, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence, which for me is a hidden blessing, because AI will force us to leave being robots, because a lot of us have really been acting like robots, doing the same thing in and out and in and out. We were never meant as human beings to live routines and to live Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. I mean, that's not human. We've invented that concept. It's really helped us to get to this place in our evolution on this planet. But I think now things will change. And I already think things have changed because of COVID, where it's really forced us to think of even work as remote. I mean, that's like a new concept. I can now work from home. I can have balance in my life. That's another new word that came after COVID. And so it's really important for us to kind of get more in line with the deeper essence of who we are. And part of this book is really for men, and I am going to include women and whoever else in whatever way you identify with. If you are human, I'm inviting you to take this journey so that you can find this masculine energy within and connect to masculine archetypes. And I say that because the same way that men for a few years were told to tap into their femininity, I'm also now kind of saying that in a way for everyone to tap into a healthy masculine energy. And this is an energy that in that demonstrates itself in various forms, which are the archetypes that I talk about in my book. So I'm going to take a couple more questions since this is our last night. If I go over just by a couple minutes, I hope you'll be gracious with me. It's also Friday, so we can maybe do this a little bit. So that was one question. Thank you so much for asking that question. This other question comes from John. And John said that he lived a good part of his life in Africa and he heard of various rituals where they would take young boys and leave the tribe and the community and then come back. And John, that's exactly what we spoke about. I think it was Tuesday with the having a strong ritual. So thanks for that. I think it was a comment. And I appreciate that. Oh, wait, I do see the question now. Do you think that we need to go back to that? Okay, that's a good question. Now, by saying, do you think we need to go back? For me, that's already kind of signaling that do I want to go and be primitive in the sense of, and I have to be careful how I say this because even using the word primitive um, lights up a lot triggers a lot of people, understandably. Do I want to go back in time to any place where they had these rituals? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about to look at those rituals back in time and learn from them. Understand that they were important. That we're not going to just belittle those rituals and say, "Oh, what do they know? They're primitives." And that's what I was trying to stay away from. That using the word that way. They're primitives. What do they know? They knew more than what we do today. Um, and so we want to look back, we want to really understand that. And then we want to ask the questions, how can we apply that today? How can we apply something similar that makes sense in today's world and in our current culture, in our family? Um, that's what I'm talking about. Because through those things, children grow up and then they understand their place in the world. And they don't understand it because we're telling them. That's another thing. They're understanding that because through this ritualization, whatever that will look like, they will tap into their core and their essence and that underlying energy within them, and that comes out. And, a lot of times today, we dictate to our children what they are to be, who they are, and and it's a double-edged sword there because I don't agree with that. However, I do think that we need to teach them about society and social norms and the rules and all that just so that they're aware of that, because when they get out into the real world, they're going to know that if they take the red light, they're going to be pulled over and given a ticket. So we have to raise our children how to be in the world, but we don't raise our children and tell them how to be. So I hope I don't confuse you the way I said that. So we want to raise our children how to be in the world, but we don't want to raise them and tell them how to be. So this is something. Thank you, Dr. Cecia Hernandez. Wow. We had such a great time back in our university days. And a fellow psychologist here, wonderful psychologist in North Carolina. So, yes, it's such an important topic. A lot of people have told me that they're thankful that I'm talking about this in this book. It's not an easy topic to talk about. And I don't have all the answers, and I didn't write this book as an end all. I wrote this book to share my personal experience in relation to masculinity and include the psychological concepts that support it or that gives it more depth, and you're able to go deeper with it. And so, this book, I will tell you, leaves out one significant archetype, which is the warrior archetype. And I think there's a reason for that. And as I state early on in the book, the book is about, in my personal experience, it's really about the men in my life, my father, my stepfather, my uncle, and how they resonated these masculine archetypes to me. Now, the interesting thing is the warrior archetype was not present in these significant male figures in my life. So I'm just going to leave it there. There most likely will be a sequel to this that might focus heavily on the warrior archetype. We'll see. And then one of the things that I'll give you a little sneak preview as well that I spoke today with this young gentleman was that if you do not have a healthy relationship with your masculine energy, essence, archetypes, it will be very difficult for you to relate to what I call the dark feminine. So let me just express that. In order to relate to what I call the dark feminine, a dark feminine figure, and I'm not going to tell you what I mean by that. I'm going to leave it up in the air. We can have a conversation about that, but that's actually another book I'm working on. And when I think of the dark feminine, I'm thinking of, and again, I'm putting myself out there, I'm thinking of figures like Lady Gaga. Maybe not so much lately, but when she first started out, for me, there was a lot of energy that represented this dark feminine figure. And dark does not mean evil. Dark does not mean, anything bad. It's a dark feminine figure. In other words, it's a figure that has remained in the unconscious of the human psyche. And it's difficult when this dark feminine comes out. We have mythology of Ereshkigal, which is a great story, and there's also the mythology or religious belief of Lilith, which is another dark feminine figure. So, in order to deal with that, in order to have a relationship with the dark feminine, and that includes strong women, I'm including that in there. You have to be a strong man. How can you be a strong man? Really being connected with your masculine essence and energy and archetypes. The same thing goes with a woman who is promoted to what has been traditionally a male role in some companies, depending on the culture. That woman, it would do her very well to tap into a masculine archetypal energy as well, which in Jungian terms, it's related to the animus figure. So that's another thing. So these are all just different concepts. Um, Jung gave them names, and other Jungian analysts have continued with those names. Some have changed them a little bit. But once you understand what they are, you can give them whatever name you like. It's really not about the name or the title or anything like that. It's having an understanding of this concept that's made to explain a phenomenon. Again, something that's without shape or form, and we give it a name, we invent a concept or this model around it that makes sense, that's helpful to us to understand it. And what did we do? We coagulated. We participated in coagulatio, which is part of the lover archetype. So I'm just going to leave you with those things. I hope those are food for thought for all of you. So again, we are launching tomorrow. I will post it on Facebook again, the link to the website, which is discoveringmyself.com. Once you get on the website, you'll see a really huge pop-up and you'll see the book there. You just put your first name and your email. You'll be added to the list. I have not seen the list. I don't want to see it until tomorrow. And then I'll make an announcement of who the 10 people are that will get a copy of the book. And then stay tuned. The book is supposed to also launch as an Audible or a audiobook soon. I'm working on that now as well. And if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to write them down and I will get back to you. Even if we're not on live, I will still keep looking at the comments and answering questions for everyone that leaves a question and a comment. And you're welcome to disagree. You're welcome to say you don't believe any of this stuff. That's okay. As long as we can have a dialogue about it. And I'm here just to kind of express something that has been my personal experience. It's based on Jungian psychology, analytical psychology, as well as with my work, years of work with different clients, working with masculinity and masculine archetypes. And that's it for now. So thank you so much for all of you that have joined me this week for the pre-launch of the book. Once again, the book is launching tomorrow, October 21st. I don't know what time. I'll keep that a secret, but those of you that have signed up, you'll be in the know because you'll get an email letting you know it's launched. So thank you again so much. If you've enjoyed this topic, if you have any other topics you'd like me to touch on related to Jungian psychology, psychology in general, spirituality, mythology, feel free to do that. I'm also found on TikTok, and I do some meditation work on TikTok and talk about these same things. Feel free also to go check me out there. Thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful Friday evening and happy weekend to all of you. Bye bye for now.